Hey everyone, it's me, Marie. So I'm recording this in LA. I'm here with Josh and Kuma, and we're hunkering down and staying inside due to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, I hope you and your family are well. I did want to set some context for this interview, though, because when we recorded and sat down with the incredible Gretchen Rubin, coronavirus wasn't a thing yet. So you're not going to hear any mention of the current state of affairs in this conversation. And to be honest, my team and I went back and forth on whether or not we should even release this. But then I thought to myself, I think we all need a break from the news, and this conversation is incredible. I really think it will inspire you. Now, as it relates to the coronavirus pandemic, I want you to know that we created something incredible for you. It's actually a coronavirus support guide, and it's over at marieforleo.com/blog. Or you can just Google my name, Marie Forleo Coronavirus Support, and you'll find it. I'm also going live a lot more on Instagram. I'm at Marie Forleo, and I want to be a source of support and love and inspiration for you during this time. So come follow me over there. Finally, take good care of yourself. I'll be here for you week after week with new content and connections, and don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that you want me to know. And with that, enjoy the episode, and I'll see you soon.
Hey, it's Marie Forleo, and welcome to another episode of Marie TV and the Marie Forleo podcast. Now, if you're interested in a happier life, and let's be honest, who isn't? My guest today has made it her mission to help us all find the way. Gretchen Rubin is the author of the blockbuster New York Times bestsellers, The Happiness Project, Outer Order, Inner Calm, The Four Tendencies, and Better Than Before, among others. Her books have sold over 3.5 million copies worldwide and have been translated into more than 30 languages. On her award-winning podcast, Happier with Gretchen Rubin, she discusses happiness and good habits with her sister Elizabeth Kraft. She's been interviewed by Oprah, walked arm in arm with the Dalai Lama, and been an answer on Jeopardy! She lives in New York City with her husband and 2 daughters. Gretchen, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be talking to you again.
Yeah, this is a long time coming. So
Yes.
I want to go back in time. So you started your career in law and were actually clerking for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor when you decided you wanted to be a writer. And I feel like there's so many people in our audience right now, every different age from all parts of the world, who find themselves in a situation like that, meaning they want to make a big career change.
Mm-hmm.
So can you take us back there and talk to us about just what that process was like, the thinking, the actions, all of it?
Well, I went to law school for all the wrong reasons. I was like, I'm good at research and writing. It'll keep my options open. It's great preparation. I can always change my mind later. So I went to law school, not because I had a passionate desire to be a lawyer, but just because it sort of felt like a logical thing to do since I didn't know what to do with myself. And I was very fortunate. I had a great run in law. I was like editor-in-chief of the Yale Law Journal, which is like the Yale version of the Law Review. And I was clerking for Sandra Day O'Connor, which is this amazing opportunity. And one of the things about me that's still true and was true then is that I will become really preoccupied with the subject. Like I'll get intensely interested in something and just want to like spend all my time thinking about it. So I just went through this with color. I went through it with placebo. I get very interested in something. And at this time, I was out having a walk one day, and I was on the Capitol Hill, and I looked up at the Capitol Dome against the sky, and I thought, just ask myself this rhetorical question. What am I interested in that everybody in the world is interested in? And I thought, well, power, money, fame, sex. And it was like power, money, fame, sex. And I became intensely preoccupied with sort of researching the ideas of power, money, fame, sex, which to me seemed like very linked. They still do. And I was just doing research, and I was staying late at work and doing research. And if you're a Supreme Court justice, you can actually check out books from the Library of Congress. So I would check out books like for Justice O'Connor, things like my favorite book was Deep in the Heart of Texas, the true story of 3 Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders who are sisters. It's an amazing book about fame. And I just got more and more interested in it. And I was just writing and taking notes as I was going, as I was thinking through these subjects. And finally it dawned on me, this is the kind of thing somebody would do if they were going to write a book. Mm-hmm. And I had never thought about being a writer myself because I always thought like either you wrote fiction or plays or poetry, or you were a journalist, or you wrote like academic books. And I didn't really think about creative nonfiction, which is what we would call it now. But it occurred to me, well, this could be a book. And then I thought, well, maybe I could write that book. And then I went to the bookstore and got something called like How to Write and Sell Your Nonfiction Book Proposal. And I just followed the directions. And got it, and skip ahead. I got an agent and got a book deal, and that's how I did it. So for me, it wasn't as much leaving something as going towards something. Just this desire to write this book, and it wasn't even like I want to be a writer. It was like I want to write this book.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so to me, I always like in Star Wars where the Millennium Falcon is being pulled in by the tractor beam, and they're like, we have to go. We can't resist, or it's going to pull us apart.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt. I'm like, I would rather, at a certain point, I was like, I would rather fail as a writer than succeed as a lawyer. I have to give this a shot. I have to try and either fail or succeed. But if I get another law job, I'm afraid I won't try. I won't do it. And so...
did you have any inner conflict around leaving law, or no? The pull to write this book was so strong that you were clear for yourself.
I was very clear for myself. But again, like I was married, so my husband was working. Like it was a pretty and I did feel like if I was ever going to do it, this was the time, because it was like the lowest risk time, because like we were moving from Washington D.C. to New York. I didn't have a job, and so it was a great kind of open transition. And I remember thinking to myself, what more am I waiting for? Like, what sign from the universe am I waiting for? Like, if there's ever a time, this universe is being like, right now.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I wait, this moment could pass. And so at that point, I really was like, this is the time.
Yeah.
But there was a day where, because my husband left law at the same time, he went into finance, and we had just been married, and we got the letter from the New York Bar Association asking us to pay our bar fees, because we'd both been admitted to the New York Bar. This is expensive. It's a lot of money. And I remember saying to him, "Oh, are we going to pay our bar fees?" And he's like, why would we pay our bar fees? No. And I'm like, okay, we're doing this. And it turns out you can go back into the bar if you just pay and like do some courses. But at the time, I felt like it was really...
That was it.
That was it. And I was like, okay, this is happening. I'm going to do this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
So
so
I didn't feel.
You didn't feel conflict. No, you just went for it.
I didn't really.
Was there what was the hardest part for you about that transition? Was it actually because obviously as an attorney, right, you were quite experienced at research and writing. So was putting the proposal together and getting that out into the world, did you find that part difficult? Or because you were kind of trained in some of those aspects, you were like, okay, this is just another way to express myself?
That part wasn't as hard. The parts where I had trouble with it was where there were no directions. If I could look up a book and it's like, this is what a proposal looks like, I'm like, okay, I can do that. But a lot of it is kind of like, what are the unspoken assumptions of this career, and like, how do people behave, and there are all these agencies. How do I understand them? Like for me, it was like I knew nothing, and I had so many great credentials as a lawyer. Like I had many feathers in my cap. And this, I didn't have a clip. I didn't have a short story. I never published anything. I had like nothing. So part of it was just like being nobody in a big world that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I liked it when it was like, this is what write a sample chapter. I'm like, I can write it, I'll just take my shot. That felt clearer. It was more the
unknown
and just kind of like, there's things that people can't even explain to you. You just sort of like have to get in there. I feel like even now I'm still always trying to figure it out. Like, what are the assumptions? What do we know? What works? Like,
well, I know even the first time
look like?
You and I spoke, which was at, I think it was at a Penguin Random House event.
Yeah,
right?
for a BEA, the big
That's
book
right.
expo.
And one of the things that struck me most about you, because I've heard about your work, I've admired your work, I've known about you for years, and I was like, oh, we're finally getting a chance to hang out and have a discussion.
Yeah, I know. I was like, how have we never met before? It seemed strange. Yeah.
Sad it was. But one of the things that struck me about you was how many great questions you asked. So I feel like that's just one of just such an amazing trait that that's about you, your curiosity and constantly asking great questions. So the reason I want to go into this is because one of the things that I've learned from writing my book and talking about it on the show for a couple of years was how many people in our audience also want to write books, are writing books, have written books. So I always think it's a good process. And there was a stat quote in the New York Times that up to 80% of people believe they've got a book in them.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's why I wanted to go there. So the first big blockbuster book, if I'm not mistaken, was Happiness Project.
Yes, that was the one. But like many people, that was my fourth book. So I had worked very hard for 10 years to become an overnight sensation. A lot of people are like, it's your first book. I'm like, no, that was my fourth book.
It was your fourth book. So
it was my fourth book.
But it was the one that kind of popped in the biggest.
It did. Yeah. And I had done, at that time, I had a blog to sort of create an audience for the book before it came out. That was unusual at the time to do something like that. And But yeah, that was kind of the book where, for a lot of people, that's where they became aware of my work.
And for the Happiness Project, this is a personal question of mine. Did you have that idea and then pitch that book and sell it? Or did you have the idea, do your year experiment, and then write the book about it?
Well, when I got the idea, I was just going to do it for myself.
Yes.
Like I said, I get really interested in things. So I'm constantly going off in these weird directions. Oh, I'm so interested in perfume. And I'll just like march off and like spend all this time researching something. So at first it was like, I should have a happiness project. Like, could I make myself happier? What would you do to make yourself happier? I was just doing all this research. I was finishing up my book about my biography of JFK at the time. So it started out as a research project that was just for me.
Yeah.
And kind of me thinking about, well, what would I do? What could move the needle? What would I experiment with? And then it just got bigger and bigger and got more and more interesting. And I was like, wow, this is kind of taking over my life. And then finally I was like, well, maybe this should be my next book. This should be my next book project. But it was unusual for nonfiction because usually, and maybe people don't know this, is usually with nonfiction, you write a proposal and you sell it off the proposal and maybe a sample chapter. Whereas with fiction, usually you've written most of it or all of it, especially if you're just starting out. And for this book, I would talk to people about it and they didn't get it. Like they would make these suggestions to me and I'm like, somebody's like, oh, you really like Benjamin Franklin. Why don't you do a thing where like you apply all of Benjamin Franklin's rules? And I'm like, see, that's not as good an idea. And it's my idea. And like, yeah, that's not working. And so I remember saying to my agent, people are not getting it. I think I need to really write a lot of it and actually have it like figured out and show it to them because I don't think that they understand how great this is going to be.
Yeah.
And so I had written quite a bit of it before I sold it, which is unusual for nonfiction. Usually you would sell it much earlier in the process. And I felt like I wasn't able to describe it until I had actually done it and written through it.
Yes.
So that wasn't that was not the norm of the way that I approached it. But with this project, I did do it that way because sometimes you have to write quite a bit before you can even know what it is that you're doing.
I love you for saying this. Thank you for saying that because there were times for me in this process, and I think in many writing processes, especially like, a lot of times when I'm talking on Marie TV, I think through my episodes and I script them and I research them and I have to wander a little bit to actually come to what I think. But I get clarity through the writing process itself.
Yes.
And I made the biggest mistake. I talked about this on Book Tour, and I want to talk about it now. I made the most rookie mistake with Everything is Figureoutable that I wasted, Gretchen, oh my goodness, probably like 3 months torturing myself. You ready for it? I tried to write the introduction first.
Okay, yeah. But it's a good process.
It's a good process.
Painful.
Super painful.
Yeah.
But I love that for you, with such a book that's made an impact on millions of lives, the Happiness Project, that you yourself, you were having difficulty being able to articulate and position it so people would get it.
Yeah.
And then you went through the process. Let me just start writing this thing.
Yeah.
And then it came to life for you.
Well, and I'll tell you what, if you look at that book, it looks like you're like, this is the obvious structure for it. It's literally like month to month.
Yes.
And, but in real life, like everything feels much more tangled up. And I rewrote the sample chapters. Fully rewrote 4 times. And I remember the 3rd time I sent it to my agent and she's a very kind person. And she said, I am so sorry to say this, but you're still just not there yet. It's not where it needs to be. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I have to go back and like re-break the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then then everything was figured out, but I kind of had to go through that process of like, well, what if I took this angle in the material? And what if I took this angle in the material? Because people, when you're not writing a book, you don't realize how essential the structure is.
That's right.
That the structure is everything. And there's so many ways you could structure an idea that once it's presented to you, you're like, well, this is the obvious way to structure it.
But no one, and this is why I love having the discussions. I don't know, do you guys find this interesting? Team Forleo's here. As you guys know, there's a lot of people. It's not just me and Gretchen sitting in a room. I find the creative process and hearing about what happens behind the scenes so utterly fascinating because so often we only see a finished product.
Yes, when it's all printed nicely and edited down and tight and right. Yeah.
But and also too, for someone like you, you're prolific and your work is so strong, research-based, story-based, has impacted so many lives. And I just thank you for sharing this because people may be like, it's Gretchen Rubin. She knows her structure.
Yeah.
No, she wrote her chapters over and over and over again.
No, and better than before, which again, if you look at it, it's like there are 21 strategies that haven't changed. Here are the 21 strategies. It's like, that took me months and months and months of just like what if you did it this way? What if you did it that way? Like, what clumps together? What pulls apart? I mean, there's so many ways of thinking about things. It's really, but I think you're right that like often talking through it. I remember Stephen King was saying that when he writes a novel, it's much, much longer and there's all these red herrings and he doesn't understand like what his themes are until it's done. And then he goes back and he takes out all the kind of dead ends because he doesn't really understand like the point of his own novel. And I think there is like that casting about.
Yeah. And also too, it may be challenging for especially someone like me. And I believe you and I share a little bit of this trait. We like structure.
Yes.
And we like things to be organized.
Yes.
And
linear.
like to be on the...
I'm always saying, this is linear. Is it linear? Is it linear?
Yes. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And also a little bit, I'll just speak for myself. I ain't gonna speak for you, Gretchen Rubin, but a little bit controlling.
Yeah.
And like writing projects like this, wanting them to come out so people can follow them and really get benefit from them. But the process of getting there, it is anything but linear and structured and organized.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I write the whole thing all at once. Like some people are like, oh, can you just send me the first 2 chapters? I'm like, I don't have the first 2 chapters until I have the final 2 chapters.
That's right.
Everything's being written simultaneously.
And also moved around because something
moved around.
Moved around.
What I can't, a huge part of my editing is just rearranging sentences. I'm like, I wrote this. Why didn't I write it in the proper order? This is just a mystery to me. I'm like, I write things in the wrong order.
I do it too, all the time.
I'm just like, oh, if I just move this sentence, everything makes so much more sense. It's like, why did I do it a different way to begin with?
I also like talking about this too, because writing is such a huge component of anyone who has a creative business right now, meaning you have to write, your social captions, your emails, copy for your website, your bio. If you ever have to give a presentation or a speech, there's so many aspects. And actually, right, Elsa, I don't know where you are, Elsa, but we were talking about this earlier. We were talking about like how difficult it was and it is to write copy. And she was sharing with me how it's especially challenging for her at the beginning. I said, here's what I want you to know. It's challenging for all of us at the beginning. It's the messiest when you're first starting to write something that needs to be kind of real good in the end. You have to just keep pushing through, though, the beginning muck where my sentences are all over the place.
Yeah. So, and then often it builds. And so it does sort of get easier because the more you've done it, the more you have to work with or adapt. Right. Yeah. But it is hard to start.
So one of the things I love in the Happiness Project is that you actually give us a fantastic set of questions to consider designing our own. So I just want to read the first 3 if that's okay.
Oh,
I have some questions. So what makes you feel good? What activities do you find fun, satisfying, or energizing? You guys will probably put these up on the lower third and so you can write them down for yourselves. What makes you feel bad? What are sources of anger, irritation, boredom, frustration, or anxiety in your life? And then this third one, is there any way in which you don't feel right about your life? Do you wish you could change your job or city or family situation or other circumstances? These are such brilliant questions.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I love them. Are these, I feel like these are the kind of questions that you can ask yourself at any time to launch any type of self-improvement project on a small scale or a large scale. Do you still ask yourself these questions?
No, absolutely. And it's interesting because I think you kind of need everything. Like you need more fun and enjoyment and pleasure and like a life where you just experience nothing negative would not be happy. But on the other hand, I think there's this, because of the negativity bias, we experience the negative more strongly.
Yes.
So like, at least I think for my Happiness Project, it was much more about trying to bring up the negatives.
When you say bring up the negatives,
I'm not getting enough sleep, so I'm really exhausted. So how do I get that? How do I fix that?
Yep.
Maybe I feel guilty because I was losing my temper with my kids all the time. What do I do so that I'm not losing my temper? But I think you're right. It's a constant process because everything's always changing in our lives, and so you have different challenges, and maybe you get one thing under control, so then you kind of want to up your game or try something different.
Yeah, I think these questions are amazing. Let's talk about the arrival fallacy from Happier at Home. You write, one of the persistent follies of human nature is to imagine true happiness is just out of reach. You share, we start off with, you're too young for that, or it's too soon for that, or I'll have plenty of time for that later. But it quickly becomes, it's too late for that, or I'm too old for that. And I'm wondering if we can talk into that and also share about waiting too long to make a snowman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the arrival fallacy is just this idea like when I get my house, I'll be happy. When I publish my book, I'll be happy. When I lose 30 pounds, I'll be happy. When I When it's, the new year, I'll be happier. Or my version of the Arrival Fallacy is to think, well, everything will calm down. Everything's going to calm down after the holidays. Everything's going to it's going to be really quiet in the summer.
It's the biggest BS,
And
right?
it never calms down. It never gets quiet. It never does. And so I think but it's this idea that, or it's another way that's kind of a version of the Arrival Fallacy. It's not the same thing, but it's very tomorrow focused, is to think, well, this will be easier tomorrow.
Yes.
Oh, starting in 2020, I'm going to exercise. Starting, on my birthday, that's when I'm going to start really watching the budget, because it always seems like things are going to be easier tomorrow.
Yeah.
You're going to be happier tomorrow, and everything's going to be easier tomorrow. You're going to have more willpower. You're going to have less temptation. You're going to have less time pressure. No, it's whatever tomorrow is, it's probably a lot like today.
Yeah. So I think maybe the fix is catching ourselves
Yes.
when we are falling into that fallacy.
Yes.
And recognizing now's the time.
Yes.
Now's the time.
It's interesting. There was just an article in the Wall Street Journal. It was talking about there are many, many more people living single today than there ever have been. And one of the things they said, that to be happy as a single person, one of the things you have to do is to be like, if I want to buy an apartment, I should buy an apartment now. If I want to go to Mexico, I should go to Mexico now. Don't wait for some kind of future when you're going to have a different kind of situation. Really do everything that you can to feel as happy as you can right now, and to take it and to live your life the way you want, rather than thinking well, I'm sort of in a temporary position right now.
Yeah.
Your life is your life.
Yeah.
Do what you want right now, and then tomorrow, who can say?
And can you tell us the story about the snow and the snowman? With this, it was around you watching the snow. Do you remember this? I'm probably trying to jog your memory.
Yeah.
You were watching the snow out the window.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
No, I experience this all the time. In fact, I was thinking about this for my next book, actually, which is this idea of I don't need to experience to the uttermost the weather conditions, because there's always going to be another time. There'll always be a snow to make a snowman, or there's always going to be a beautiful sunset. I don't have to go out there, or I don't have to go out and look at the moon, because I have my whole life to look at the moon. But then the snow goes away and you never made the snowman, or the whole winter goes away and you never made the snowman. And so I know, and I was thinking about that with all of nature. It's I think, oh, I should walk in the park and make sure that I see all the cherry blossoms. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll wait a week or two. It's okay, they're not going to be there in a week or two.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I could see them next year. It's there's no guarantee.
That's right.
That's really that big one. There's really no guarantee.
Yeah.
So I'm someone who loves to get rid of clutter. So I really loved outer order, inner calm. In fact,
it's fun to contemplate.
Oh my goodness. So when we're shooting this, my birthday is coming up. I'm not sure exactly when this will air, but people were asking me, they're like, what are you doing around your birthday? And what's your whole plan? And I said, I'm actually taking some time. And they're like, are you going on a trip? And I said, no. You know what I'm doing? I'm going to be at my house and I'm completely clearing out all of the clutter. And I'm not a person you're here in the studio and my team knows I can't stand clutter. It literally drives me nuts. If I ever come in and there's just too much shit all over the place, I'm like, nope, we got to get it out. I can't do it.
Yeah.
It's really a thing for me. So
I'm sure you're just licking your chops at the thought of doing a deep dive.
Doing the deep dive and just getting and we live in New York City. The spaces aren't big. We do not have a huge apartment. So I don't have a lot to begin with. I'm not a person who stores a lot of things.
You don't have an attic and a basement and a garage and an extra bedroom and a pantry. Yeah.
But even the fact that my drawers don't have enough open space. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
and all that stuff. So I loved these questions. You say our rooms can shape our thoughts and our possessions can change our moods. There's 3 big questions that you say we can ask ourselves when clearing clutter. Would you like me to read them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 1, do I need it?
Yes.
2, do I love it? And 3, do I use it?
Yeah.
Tell us about your evolving relationship with stuff, because it feels like it showed up in all of your books. And then, we got to outer order, inner calm.
Well, that's very perceptive, because I've long been preoccupied with people's relationships to objects and possessions. I just find that super, super fascinating. And there's a whole gigantic and interesting literature. And in fact, one of the books that I wrote, which is this very weird little art book, is called Profane Waste, and it's all about why people destroy their own possessions, because that was something that I was obsessed with for a long time. It's why would somebody destroy their own possession? But the need it, use it, love it is, sometimes people are sort of you should get rid of as much as you can and you'll be happier with less. And I think for many people that's true, kind of simplicity lovers. You and I are both simplicity lovers, and so we like getting rid of things. And I actually take great joy in like giving something away, or like when something wears out. Like I love getting holes in my socks.
Me
like,
too.
we wore through our carpet on our stairs, and I'm like, why do I find that so satisfying? I'm like, we've used it up.
Yes.
That feels so good to me. The last bit of the toothpaste, I find immensely satisfying.
The last chunk of cheese. I'm
oh,
like,
yes, we did it all the way to the end. But at the same time, I think that we want to have room for just things that we love that maybe we're not using all the time, but we just like. My mother gave me these beautiful vintage paper hats that you use for New Year's Eve, and they're these beautiful colors, and they're just so neat. And like, I don't know what to do with them, but I just keep them in a drawer, and every once in a while I look at them, and they just give me immense pleasure. I don't need them or use them, but I love them. Yeah. So I'm like, there's room for that because I love them. So I don't think you have to just get rid of, like, people are like, if you haven't touched it in a year, get rid of it. I'm like, well, I think that's me. I have my yearbooks from when I was in grade school.
We're not going to get rid of those.
I want to keep them. Like, I just, weirdly, somebody emailed me, and I'm like, I'm going to look her up in the yearbook just the other day. Because, and also that's irreplaceable. Or like somebody said to me, well, what about my journals from my teenage years? I'm like, you could never get that back. No. I would not, like, the extra KitchenAid mixer that you can get rid of, the teenage journals, I wouldn't get rid of that. So I think need it, use it, love it covers kind of everything that is adding value to our life in some way. Some things aren't used, but they're not useless.
Yeah.
But then there's just the stuff like, I don't know about you, like I just found things I'm like, I didn't even know we had it. I was like, this happened like 2 months ago. I wrote a book, Out of Order and Recall, and literally this just happened to me. I'm looking in the kitchen drawers. These are like our top kitchen drawers that we're in all the time. I'm like, that's interesting. We have a garlic press. No, we have 2 garlic presses. So I'm like, well, we can definitely give away 1 garlic press because we don't need. So which is the best one? So keep the good one, give away the other one. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, we don't ever use a garlic press because my I don't cook. My husband cooks, and he buys the little jars where you get it already minced. So I'm like, why do we have any garlic presses? I have no recollection of these even coming into our apartment. I have no idea why we have them. We definitely don't need them. We never use them, and we had 2. It's like, get rid of that stuff, and you just feel so good. And then somebody who would use it, get some joy out of it. Put them to work. Yeah.
How do you deal with your family with the clutter? Because like I know, I remember it was a challenge when my stepson was a teenager, and so it was myself, my stepson, Josh. We were all in a small apartment, and I just remember, I didn't handle that well. I will tell you, I failed in that department because I have a particular idea. If I look around and I see visual clutter, like it's like I have to do a whole mental thing to like calm myself down. How have you managed that with your family?
Well, you're pointing out something that comes up all the time because different levels of tolerance for clutter and like desire for tidiness is a big source of conflict at work and at home because people just have different levels where they feel comfortable.
My way is best, of course. No, I'm just kidding.
That's how we all feel.
Horrible. I'm horrible, you guys. I don't mean that. It's a joke.
I know. My sister is clutter blind. She's one of these few people who like literally
doesn't see it,
doesn't notice it, doesn't care. I go in, she lets me clean up her stuff because I get so much fun from it, but she doesn't really care. Yeah. But that's unusual. I'm really lucky because my husband and I are both the same. So like he will say things like, why don't we take 20 minutes and clean up? And like, we'll just sort of, if things are just getting messy, and he's very supportive of like, if I'm like, I'm going to go through the kitchen stuff, or, I remember one time I was helping him go through his clothes, and I was sort of holding up like 2 things at once and being like, yes or no. And I held up a pair of pants, and he's like, I've never seen that pair of pants before in my life. I'm like, well, then somebody snuck in here and put them there because I don't know why they're here.
Whose pants are these?
Yeah, whose are they? I'm like, I think they're yours since they're in your closet. But anyway, so he's very tolerant of it. My daughters, I think as teenagers, there's kind of an autonomy thing where they kind of want to control their space, and one way to control your space is to have it be messy. So my own view is like, is this where you want to spend your points?
That's right.
Your argue points.
Yeah. I failed in this department many
But
times.
it's hard when it's like one thing if it's your room and I can close the door and it's like, okay, if you want to live that way, that's fine in your room. But then when it spills out into like the kitchen, the living room, the shared space, it can be hard. So I spend a lot of time. I'm lucky because I find it kind of relaxing to sort of tidy. I don't like to clean, but just like putting things away, I kind of find relaxing. So I do a lot of just like that kind of low level. Yeah. And then I just close the door to their rooms and say, okay, you can do whatever you want there.
No, that's good. That's smart. I don't think I have teenagers in my home anymore, so I feel like I've crossed that bridge. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
So, Gretchen, as we wrap up, you've done so much incredible work and research, all these books, all the people that you've helped. I'm curious, creating change is a big common theme in your work. What do you believe is a common denominator of people who are actually able to make significant change in their lives and have it last?
That's the $1 million question,
I know.
right?
Yeah. Any insight you can provide for us. It might not be one thing, but anything that you've noticed.
Well,
over your career.
I think what it is I think that when people really think about themselves and do it in the way that's right for them, that's like their temperament, their nature, their interests, their values, rather than saying some magical person is going to hand me 7 bullets on a single page PDF and I just will execute. I think that people are so different. Yeah. And then a lot of times when people don't succeed or when they really feel discouraged, it's because they're trying to do it in a way that's not right for them. And it's not that there's anything wrong with them or they lack willpower, or or they're lazy or whatever it is that people say. It's that they're doing it in a way that's not right for them. And so a very obvious example of this is morning people and night people. Because if you read all the expert advice is, if this is important to you, get up early and do it. Get up early and write that novel. Get up early and run those 3 miles. Okay, but the research also shows that there truly are morning people and night people.
Yes.
And there's a fascinating book called Internal Time, which if you ever want to have something to show to somebody it's real, this book will make the case for you. Some people are night people. It's largely genetically determined and a function of age, and they are just at their most productive and creative and energetic later in the day.
Yes.
And so if you're like, I need to exercise, I need to get up early and exercise, and I'm failing, maybe it's because you're a night person. So the problem isn't the exercise. The problem is you're barely getting to work on time in the morning. And the idea that you're going to get up early and exercise is just not realistic for you. For me, the idea that I would go for a run at 4:00 or go to an exercise class after work, I would never do that. Yeah. But for a night person, that could be great because they're going to be up until midnight or 2. And so I think so what you're better off doing if you're a night person is saying, can I organize my life so my day starts later? Some people can't do that. Some people don't have that flexibility.
That's right.
But some people do, and they don't even take advantage of it. I'm like, because they feel like there's something wrong with them. I'm like, you're a night person. Don't do anything before 10 a.m. Like if you can roll out and have a cup of coffee at 9:45, that's what's going to work for you because you'll work till 2.
Yes.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so I think when you see the people who are making change, it's often because another thing is accountability. So I have a personality framework that I came up with, the 4 Tendencies. And what I see is that one kind of person, the obliger, really needs outer accountability to meet inner expectations. So if they want to read more, they need to join a book group. If they need to exercise, they need to take a class or work out with a trainer or work out with a friend or whatever. Once they know that they need outer accountability, there's a million ways to plug in outer accountability, but you have to recognize that that's what you need. I don't need outer accountability. But if somebody else does, then there's a million ways to get it. But you have to kind of recognize that that's the piece that's missing.
Yeah. So it feels like it's a lot of self-awareness and also really understanding that there are different recipes for different people. And that's, for me, I think that's one of the kind of downsides of where we are a little bit in culture. Like, I love the fact that everyone can create content, and that's a beautiful thing on so many levels. But on the other side of it, it's like, to your point, like these 7 bullets, it's like, no. Sometimes I even get frustrated with myself because, not frustrated with myself, but if I'm answering a question on Marie TV or we're doing a particular episode on a topic, I always try and put in a disclaimer and say, hey guys, this isn't comprehensive. I'm answering either this question for this individual based on what I know and my intuition and all the things that come with my gifts.
Your experience of seeing people over and over.
Yes. Or if I'm talking about this particular topic, my answer is not comprehensive, right?
Yes.
I'm not writing a book. It's like a 5-minute video. And I think to your point, it's just so good because I can hear people in our audience, especially around if you're a nighttime person, there's so much pressure that this is the only way.
Yes.
And it's like there are many paths.
Oh my gosh. And a great resource if you want to see that play out is a book called Daily Rituals by Mason Curry.
Yes.
It's not really about rituals. It's really just about habits. But what you see is some people stay up late and some people get up early and some people drink coffee and some people drink vodka and some work alone and some work in a busy studio and some work, 17 hours a day and some work for half an hour. And you're like, these are all extremely productive,
Yes.
creative. There's scientists, there's painters, there's writers, there's every kind of choreographers, every kind of outstanding person. And what you realize, it's not that they have the same habits, but they figured out what works for them and they make sure that they have it set up. If I need to work in a crowded studio with a million people around me, like Andy Warhol, I will create the factory and I will be in the center of all this action. Okay, I'm Gertrude Stein. I write a half an hour a day, but nothing interferes with it. Flannery O'Connor, one of my favorites, she wrote for 2 hours every day, but she said nothing interferes with that 2 hours. I can't write any more than 2.
Yes.
But nothing interferes with that too. And so it's more about like figuring yourself out and then guarding that.
Yes. And I love this conversation also because I think for me in my creative life, I've had to try on different things.
Yes. It's not obvious.
It's not obvious.
No.
And so, you might have, there could be a rock star that you admire or a dancer or a writer or whomever. And you're like, oh, this is their secret to success. And I think for everyone listening now, to give yourself permission to try on a habit or a ritual.
Yes.
Just like you would go trying on a coat in a store.
Yeah.
And you try it on for maybe a week or 2 weeks and see if you thrive.
Yes.
And then if not, right?
But also if something isn't working, rather than saying there's something wrong with me.
Yes.
Why is it that Marie, she can do it, it should work for me. It's like, okay, one thing, if it's not working for you, that's information. Now you know that doesn't work for you. What's something else to try? Like one thing that people often say is, you should start small. Like that's the way to make a change. Start small, make incremental change, gradual changes, work up to it. But some people aren't interested in that. They want to go big or go home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're like, I only want to make big changes or else I lose interest and I lose momentum and like I don't have my enthusiasm. It's like, great. If you've been trying to do an incremental change and it's not working, do something big. If you've been trying to do something big and bold, try something little. Like try, because you're exactly right. It's like you may have to try on many identities and many approaches
before you find that little recipe that works for you.
Yeah. And I mean, I think one thing is like work pace. Like some people are marathoners and some people are sprinters. So marathoners are people like me. We like to start early and work steadily and maybe not that much any one day and have a lot of room at the end. Yeah. And we feel like that unleashes our creativity. But then there are sprinters and they like to be right up against a deadline. And they feel like the adrenaline crystallizes their thoughts and it like gives them energy. And they feel like they kind of burn out or lose interest if they start too early or they just spin out and spend too much time. But people are always saying, like to marathoners like me, like, no, you need like the excitement of the deadline. My sister is a TV writer and she worked for a showrunner who thought everybody did their most creative work if they were up against a deadline. So he would he would orchestrate like emergencies because he thought but she was a marathoner. So for her, it was very, very hard to work that way. Whereas as a marathoner, I'm like, why don't you start earlier? Give yourself more time. Like, let your thoughts expand because that's what works for me.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, if you and I need to collaborate, well, maybe we need to talk about how we can create a system that will work for both of us. But there's nothing better about my way or your way.
Yeah.
It's just but again, it's like, if you feel like you burn out if you start too soon, maybe you do better with a little more urgency. Or if you feel like you're really anxious being up against a deadline, maybe pull it back and give yourself a little bit more breathing room.
Thank you so much. Your work is incredible. And this is why I love it, because it's so nuanced and it's so personalized. And it really also challenges each of us to make decisions for ourselves and create those recipes for success. Gretchen, thank you for coming on Marie TV.
Thank you. This is I feel like we could talk all day.
All day. Now, Gretchen and I would love to hear from you. So from everything we talked about today, what's the biggest insight you're taking away? And most importantly, how can you turn that insight into action starting right now? Leave a comment over at marieforleo.com and let us know. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our email list and become an MF Insider. You're going to get great emails from me filled with love and positivity, and they will help you stay on track. Until next time, stay on your game and keep going for your dreams, because the world really does need that special gift that only you have. Catch you soon. Hey, you having trouble bringing your dreams to life? Well, guess what? The problem isn't you. It's not that you're not hardworking or intelligent or deserving. It's that you haven't yet installed the one key belief that will change it all. Everything is figureoutable. It's my new book, and you can order it now at everythingisfigureoutable.com.